Tell me, this isn't real.
Clara, wait, I can explain.
So this is what you were hiding from me.
London was quiet that night. Too quiet. Rain tapped softly against the glass windows of the apartment, creating a calm that did not match the tension inside. Clara stood by the window, arms folded tightly across her chest, her reflection staring back at her. Something was wrong. She didn't have proof. She didn't have evidence. But she felt it, and Clara was not the kind of woman who ignored her instincts. Clara was not loud, not dramatic, not like the women who shout or fight in public. No, she was controlled, observant, sharp. In her world, respect and honesty mattered more than anything. And one thing she could never tolerate: being made a fool. Tony walked into the living room, loosening his tie. "You're still awake?" he asked casually. Clara turned slowly, her eyes locked onto his. "Tony." Her voice was calm, too calm. He paused. "Yes." She stepped closer. "Is there something you're not telling me?" Tony's heart skipped, but his face remained steady. "No." Clara studied him carefully. In London, relationships weren't just about love. They were about trust, independence, and equality. And right now, she felt none of that. Clara didn't believe in going around in circles. So she asked, straight, clear, sharp, "Is there another woman, somewhere in Africa?" Silence. The rain grew louder. Tony forced a small laugh. "Where is this coming from? Answer me." Her voice didn't rise, but it carried weight. Tony stepped closer. "Clara, I've told you before, there's nothing like that." She searched his eyes, deeply, carefully. "You're sure?" He nodded. "I have never been with anyone else. I've never married another woman." Clara held his gaze for a few seconds longer. Then, she nodded slowly. "All right." But inside, she wasn't convinced. That was the thing about Clara. She didn't rush. She didn't explode. She investigated, quietly, carefully. And once she found the truth, there would be no turning back. Meanwhile, Sandra sat in her room, her phone in her hand, her laptop open. On the screen, her online fashion class was live. "Good evening everyone," she said calmly, her voice confident. "Today, I'll be teaching you how to turn simple fabric into a statement piece." Comments poured in. "You're so talented. I love your designs. Please don't stop teaching." Sandra smiled. This was her real life now. Not the one Mrs. Williams controlled, not the one Tony planned, but the one she built. Just minutes later, Mrs. Williams called from the living room. "Sandra." "Yes, Ma." Sandra quickly adjusted herself and stepped out. "The phone," Mrs. Williams said, handing it over. "It's Tony." Sandra took it, calm, prepared, different. She placed it to her ear. Tony spoke. "Mum, my son. How are you today?" Sandra said loudly. There was silence. Again. Mrs. Williams stiffened slightly. Tony paused, then forced a response. "I'm fine." Sandra smiled slightly. "Have you eaten well? You must take care of your health." Mrs. Williams watched her closely. Something was off. Very off. After the call ended, Mrs. Williams turned sharply. "What is wrong with you these days?" Sandra blinked innocently. "Nothing, Ma. You are behaving strangely." Sandra lowered her gaze slightly. "I'm just happy, Ma." Mrs. Williams didn't respond, but her eyes said everything. She didn't believe her. That night, Sandra received another message. "She's starting to suspect him." Sandra's eyes narrowed. "Clara." "Yes." Sandra's heart beat faster. Everything was aligning. Everything was moving. Slowly. Dangerously. Sandra sat up straight, thinking, planning. Then she typed, "It's time she knows." There was a pause. Then the reply came. "Are you ready for the consequences?" Sandra looked at her reflection. Her face calm, her eyes strong. I've been ready. Across the ocean, Clara sat with Tony's phone in her hand. Unlocked. A message notification popped up. Unknown number. She opened it, and froze. A photo. Tony, standing beside Sandra, at their wedding. Clara's voice dropped into a whisper. What is this? Clara's fingers trembled slightly as she stared at the phone in her hand. The image refused to disappear. Tony, standing beside a woman she had never seen before. Dressed like a groom, happy, complete, married. Her chest tightened. No, she whispered. This must be a mistake. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Clara didn't scream. She didn't throw the phone. She didn't cry. Not yet. That wasn't who she was. Instead, she sat down slowly, her breathing steady, her mind racing. In her world, in London, emotions were not thrown around carelessly. They were controlled, measured, used. And right now, Clara was thinking. She zoomed into the picture. Studied every detail. The clothes, the setting, the expressions. This was not a joke. This was not editing. This was real. Her jaw tightened. So, you lied, she whispered. Clara didn't call Tony immediately. No, she wasn't going to give him time to prepare a lie. Instead, she waited. Hours passed. The apartment remained silent. The rain had stopped. But inside Clara, a storm was building. The door opened quietly. Tony walked in, unaware. Tough day, he muttered, dropping his keys. Clara didn't move. She sat still, watching him. He looked up. Something felt off immediately. You're still awake. No answer. Clara. She slowly lifted the phone and turned the screen toward him. Tony's breath caught.
Tell me,
just for a
this
second.
isn't real.
But that second was
Clara,
enough.
wait, I can
What
explain.
is this? Clara
this is what
asked
you were
calmly,
hiding from me.
too calmly. Tony forced a laugh. Where did you get that? That's your concern, she replied. Tony walked closer. It's not what you think. Don't insult me, she cut in sharply. Clara stood up slowly, her eyes locked into his. You told me, you have never married another woman. Tony swallowed. I can explain. Then explain. Her voice was firm, unshaking, unforgiving. Tony ran his hand through his hair. Thinking fast, calculating. It was complicated, he began. Clara let out a short laugh. Marriage is complicated, she said. Clara, listen. No, you listen. She stepped closer, and for the first time, her anger showed. You lied to me. Her voice cracked slightly. You built a life with me, while hiding another woman. Tony remained silent. It's not what you think, he said again. Clara shook her head slowly. Then what is it? Tony hesitated, then said, she means nothing. The moment those words left his mouth, Clara froze. Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. Nothing, she repeated. Yes. Clara laughed, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. You married someone, and she means nothing. Tony didn't respond. Do you even hear yourself? She continued, her voice rising now. What kind of man does that? Tony's jaw tightened. You don't understand. Then make me understand. Tony exhaled deeply. Then, he said it. I needed children. Clara stared at him. Her expression changed. Not anger. Not shock. Something deeper. Something colder. Children, she repeated slowly. Tony nodded. You didn't want them. Her eyes hardened. So you went somewhere else to get them. Tony said nothing, and that silence was the answer. Clara stepped back slowly, as if seeing him for the first time. You cheated on me, she said quietly. Tony opened his mouth. And worse, she continued. You built a whole life behind my back. Her voice dropped. And you expect me to accept that? Tony stepped closer. Clara, we can fix this. No. The word was sharp, final, powerful. She looked him straight in the eye. You don't get to decide that. Clara picked up her phone again. Her face calm once more. Controlled. Dangerously controlled. You should have told me the truth, she said softly. Tony's chest tightened. Because now. She paused. Her eyes locked into his. I will find out everything myself. Back in Nigeria, Sandra sat quietly, staring at her screen. Another message came in. She knows. Sandra's lips curved slightly. Good. Her heart beat steadily. No fear. No hesitation. Let the game begin. That same night, Mrs. Williams knocked on Sandra's door. Her face serious. Her eyes sharp. We need to talk. Sandra's heart skipped, but her face remained calm. Yes, Ma. Mrs. Williams stepped in, closed the door behind her, and said, What exactly are you hiding from me? The silence in the room felt heavier than usual. Sandra stood still. Mrs. Williams had just walked in. Her expression, unreadable, but her eyes, those eyes were searching, digging, trying to find something Sandra had worked hard to hide. Sandra's heart beat steadily, but inside her chest, there was movement, not panic, not fear, calculation. She had changed. She no longer reacted like before. She responded carefully. Yes, Ma, Sandra said softly. Mrs. Williams closed the door behind her. A soft click echoed. That sound alone felt like a warning. Mrs. Williams stepped closer. Slow. Controlled. Tell me something, Sandra. Sandra remained calm. Yes, Ma. What exactly are you hiding from me? Silence. Not loud, but thick. Sandra blinked once, then tilted her head slightly. I don't understand, Ma. Mrs. Williams studied her, long, carefully, like a woman trying to read a book written in another language. You have changed, Mrs. Williams said finally. Sandra nodded slightly. I'm growing, Ma. Mrs. Williams narrowed her eyes. That is not what I mean. Sandra stayed quiet. The room felt smaller now. Tighter. The air heavier. Mrs. Williams stepped forward again. You are too calm these days. Sandra forced a small smile. I'm trying to be a better wife, Ma. That sentence paused Mrs. Williams for half a second. But only half. At the same time, in London, Clara sat in her apartment surrounded by documents. Printed screenshots, call records, travel logs, everything she could find. Her laptop screen glowed in the dark room. Tony had no idea, but Clara was building a case. Not emotionally, not randomly, systematically, like someone preparing for court. In London relationships, Clara believed in one thing. Truth always comes out eventually. And when it does, there are consequences. She picked up her phone and dialed a contact. I need everything on Tony's travel history, she said calmly. The person on the other end replied, Give me time. Clara responded softly, You don't have much, and hung up. Meanwhile Mrs. Williams crossed her arms. You are not answering me properly. Sandra lowered her eyes slightly. I don't know what you mean, Ma. Mrs. Williams stepped closer. You are becoming too independent. That word, independent, it sounded like a crime in this house. Sandra didn't respond immediately. Then softly, I'm just learning new things, Ma. Mrs. Williams frowned slightly. What things? Sandra paused, just for a second, then smiled. Fashion. Sandra had learned something important. In houses like this, the best weapon was not anger. It was normal behavior. If they expected fear, give them calm. If they expected silence, give them words. If they expected obedience, give them obedience, but controlled. In London, Clara opened a file she had just received. Her eyes narrowed. Flights, hotel bookings, and then, a name. Sandra Williams. Clara froze. Her hand stopped midair. Sandra, she whispered. then slowly repeated it. So you have a name. Clara leaned back. Her breathing slowed. Everything was connecting now. The photos, the lies, the inconsistencies. She opened her phone and sent a message. I found her. Back in Nigeria. That night. Sandra sat alone in her room. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. A single message. She is looking for you. Sandra didn't move, didn't panic. Instead, she exhaled slowly, and whispered. Finally, she opened her laptop. Her online fashion platform was growing now. More students, more followers, more income. But tonight, she wasn't teaching. She was planning. She created a new folder. Inside it, she began saving everything. Messages, patterns, names, calls. She was no longer just surviving. She was building something. Meanwhile, Mrs. Williams stood outside Sandra's room, listening. There was no sound inside. She frowned slightly, then whispered, "This girl," her eyes darkened, "is hiding something bigger than I thought." But inside Clara's apartment, nothing was ordinary anymore. The woman Tony had married, the woman he had lied to, sat perfectly still at the dining table. Before her lay the evidence. The wedding photograph, travel records, and now, the marriage certificate. Tony Williams, Sandra Okafor, legally married in Nigeria. The words stared back at her like a personal insult. For several minutes, Clara simply looked at it. No tears, no shouting, just silence. The kind of silence that often comes before destruction. Clara was not the sort of woman who created scenes in public. She had been raised differently. In her family, emotions were acknowledged, but never allowed to take control. One dealt with problems intelligently, decisively, and most importantly, privately. Humiliation was unacceptable, but public humiliation, unforgivable. Tony had not only betrayed her, he had embarrassed her. That was something Clara could never ignore. She remembered the night they met. A charity gala in Manchester. Tony had been charming, sophisticated, attentive, different. He listened when she spoke. He laughed at her jokes. He made her feel seen. For years, she had believed they were partners, equals, a team. And now she realized, she had been sharing her bed with a stranger. Her closest friend, Amelia, arrived that afternoon. Elegant, sharp-eyed, and fiercely loyal. The moment Clara opened the door, Amelia knew. "Oh dear," Amelia murmured, stepping inside. Clara handed her the documents without a word. Amelia scanned them. Her eyes widened. "You're joking." "I wish I were." Amelia sat down slowly. "He's actually married." "Yes." "To her." "Yes. And you had no idea." Clara gave a humorless laugh. "Apparently, I was the last to know." Amelia expected tears. She expected rage. Instead, Clara poured tea. Because that was what one did. Even when one's marriage was collapsing. Particularly when one's marriage was collapsing. Amelia shook her head. "You're taking this remarkably well." "No," Clara replied calmly. "I am simply choosing my timing." Amelia smiled slightly. Poor Tony. He had no idea what was coming. "I need to know everything," Clara said. "Everything, everything." Amelia leaned forward. "Do you want revenge, or do you want freedom?" Clara's lips curved faintly. "Who says I can't have both?" At that exact moment, Sandra was seated in her room in Nigeria, reviewing student submissions from her online fashion academy. Her followers had doubled in just 2 months. Money was flowing, opportunities were opening, and for the first time in a long time, she felt powerful. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. International code. United Kingdom. Sandra stared at it. Her heart skipped. Then the call stopped. A message appeared. "Hello, Sandra. My name is Clara. We need to talk." Sandra froze. Everything around her seemed to go silent. So, the storm had finally arrived. Sandra read the message again. And again. Then once more. She had imagined this moment many times. But imagination and reality were two entirely different things. She typed. Deleted. Typed again. Finally, she sent a simple reply. I know who you are. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, good. Then you know why I'm contacting you. Sandra's fingers hovered over the screen. Yes. A pause. Then Clara sent. Did you know about me? Sandra looked away. That question carried weight, pain, truth, and perhaps, the beginning of an alliance. Sandra replied carefully. Not at first. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Clara wrote. And now. Sandra inhaled deeply. Now I know everything. The typing bubble appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally. Then we're both victims. Sandra stared at those words. Victims. It was the first time anyone had described her situation so accurately. Meanwhile, Tony sat in his London office, oblivious. He smiled through meetings, answered emails, discussed investments, all while the two women whose lives he had entangled were now communicating. The irony would have been amusing, if it weren't so dangerous. That evening, Clara stood by her bedroom window, phone in hand, Amelia beside her. So, Amelia asked, she's not the enemy. Interesting. Clara nodded. He lied to both of us. Amelia folded her arms. What will you do? Clara smiled. A cold, elegant smile. The same thing any sensible British woman would do. And that is, Clara lifted her glass. Gather evidence first. Mrs. Williams had begun noticing changes. Sandra smiled more, argued less, seemed calmer. Too calm. And a woman who suddenly stops reacting is never harmless. That evening, she entered Sandra's room without knocking. Sandra quickly locked her phone. Mrs. Williams noticed. Who were you talking to? No one, Ma. Mrs. Williams stepped closer. Let me see your phone. Sandra's stomach tightened, but her face remained composed. It's charging, Ma. Mrs. Williams stared at her, long, hard, then finally turned away, but suspicion had taken root. Later that night, Sandra received another message from Clara. This one contained only 4 words. I'm coming to Nigeria. Sandra's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Outside her door, Mrs. Williams stood silently, listening, and smiling. London was cold. Nigeria was warm. But across 2 continents, 2 women sat awake that same night, staring at their phones, connected by the same man, and the same betrayal. Sandra read Clara's message again. I'm coming to Nigeria. Her heart raced. Not from fear. Not anymore. From anticipation. For months, Sandra had lived inside a lie. A carefully decorated prison. A marriage built on deception. A home ruled by cruelty. But now, the truth had crossed oceans. And, truth, once invited in, rarely leaves quietly. 3 weeks later, Clara landed in Lagos. Elegant, composed, dressed in a tailored cream suit, oversized sunglasses, and the kind of confidence money could not buy. Sandra had seen pictures before. But seeing Clara in person was different. She was taller than Sandra expected. Calmer, sharper, the kind of woman who entered a room and made people sit up straighter. When their eyes met at the airport, neither woman spoke immediately. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. 2 women, 1 husband, 1 betrayal. Then Clara smiled softly. You must be Sandra. Sandra nodded. And you must be Clara. Clara extended her hand. Sandra took it. Clara squeezed gently. No, she said. We've been introduced under terrible circumstances. Let's start again. And for the first time in months. Sandra laughed. Over dinner that evening, they spoke for hours. Not as rivals. Not as enemies. But as women who had both been manipulated by the same man. Sandra told Clara everything. The proposal. The gifts, the wedding, Mrs. Williams's cruelty, Tony's lies, the hidden calls, the humiliation. Clara listened quietly, sometimes shaking her head, sometimes laughing in disbelief, sometimes simply reaching across the table and squeezing Sandra's hand. "Good Lord," Clara muttered at one point, sipping her tea. The man really thought he was running an international franchise. Sandra burst into laughter. That was the moment everything changed. Not revenge, not anger, sisterhood. Clara was many things. Heartbroken, humiliated, angry. But she was also intelligent. And unlike Tony, she understood paperwork. She understood assets. And most importantly, she understood British law. Tony had committed fraud, marriage deception, financial concealment, immigration misrepresentation, and depending on how his residency and citizenship applications had been filed. Possibly far worse, very far worse. Clara contacted one of London's top family law firms, then an immigration specialist, Home Office, and finally, a forensic accountant. Tony had spent years building his empire. Clara intended to examine every brick. Sandra provided wedding certificates, photographs, call logs, and bank transfers. Every gift, every payment, every lie. Mrs. Williams had underestimated Sandra. Tony had dismissed her. That was their greatest mistake. Sandra had kept everything, every receipt, every message, every insult. "Always keep records," Clara said approvingly. Sandra smiled. "I learned from the best." Tony returned to Nigeria expecting control. Instead, he found Clara sitting comfortably in his mother's living room, crossing one elegant leg over the other while sipping tea. Sandra sat beside her. Mrs. Williams looked as though someone had replaced her blood with ice water. Tony froze. "Clara." She looked up. "Oh, good. You're here." His face drained of color. "What are you doing in Nigeria?" Clara tilted her head. "Meeting family." Sandra almost laughed. Tony tried denial. He tried anger. He tried charm. Then excuses. None worked. Clara placed a thick folder on the table. Inside, legal notices, financial injunctions, asset freezes, petitions, and a formal complaint to UK authorities. "You lied on official documents," Clara said evenly. "You concealed a legal marriage." Tony's hands shook. "This can be resolved privately." Clara smiled. "It could have been." She leaned forward. "But you chose dishonesty." The legal proceedings in London moved swiftly. His accounts were scrutinized, his property interests frozen, his business partners notified, immigration authorities reopened his file. His citizenship status came under immediate review pending investigation. The financial settlement was devastating. And brutal. Clara didn't need revenge. The law handled that beautifully. Tony lost nearly everything he had spent years building. Investments, properties, reputation, influence. And when the dust settled, he was merely a man with expensive regrets. Mrs. Williams watched her world collapse brick by brick. The cars were sold, the accounts emptied, the staff left, friends stopped calling, respect vanished faster than money ever does. One afternoon, she sat alone in her once grand sitting room. The silence was unbearable. For the first time, she understood what powerlessness felt like. And it did not suit her. Tony returned home a broken man. No confidence, no arrogance, no empire, only consequences. He stood before Sandra. "I made mistakes." Sandra looked at him calmly. "No, Tony." She shook her head. "Mistakes are accidental." Her eyes held his. "What you did was deliberate." He lowered his gaze. There was nothing left to say. Clara kept her promise. She helped Sandra expand her fashion academy internationally. They registered the company together, launched a mentorship program, and within 2 years, Sandra's platform had thousands of students across Africa, Europe, and beyond. Women learning, Women earning. Women rising. Clara became more than an ally. She became family. A sister fate had introduced in the strangest possible way. Sandra finally achieved her dream. Not because Tony gave her a chance, but because she created one herself. Her designs were featured in London Fashion Week. Her story inspired women worldwide. And when interviewers asked about her journey, she always smiled before saying, "Sometimes betrayal is simply destiny changing your direction." Tony and Mrs. Williams lost everything they valued. Money, control, status. But their greatest loss, Sandra, the woman they underestimated, the woman they tried to break, the woman who rose anyway. On a bright London afternoon, Sandra and Clara stood outside Sandra's new flagship studio. Reporters gathered. Cameras flashed. Clara adjusted Sandra's collar. "You've done well." Sandra smiled. "We've done well." Clara linked arms with her. "Quite right." Together, they walked inside. Heads high. Unstoppable. What's the lesson here? Never underestimate a woman who has discovered the truth. And never pit women against each other. Because when women unite, empires fall. Thank you, my amazing viewers. What would you have done if you were Sandra? Would you forgive Tony, or would you choose success instead? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this powerful story of betrayal, justice, and sisterhood, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.